Okay.
Hello, everybody. That's another episode of What Drives Her Woman to Women. And today we are welcoming Jackie Coventry. Thank you, Jackie, for being here.
You're welcome. I'm really happy and excited.
So today, Jackie, you are going to talk to us about your journey, and you will probably be talking about the fibromyalgia that you have, as well as how you are managing it, which is through mindfulness, and you are a teacher of mindfulness. So please tell us about maybe how you learned that you were having fibromyalgia.
Okay, so thank you for inviting me to talk about this subject, which is so close to my heart, both fibromyalgia or any hidden disability, hidden disease, but also the power of mindfulness and how it can transform our lives, whether it's our physical health, our emotional health, or just our general well-being. And I think people forget about mindfulness being there just to have a happy life. So I'm really passionate about talking about this subject. So for me, my journey towards a diagnosis of fibromyalgia was very long and very slow. It took many years to get a diagnosis, which is quite common. It certainly was that long ago. I think it's easier now, but I don't know, not necessarily so. So I had symptoms probably for 2 years before I finally sought help, because I kept thinking I was just being silly, making it up. So I pushed it down, pushed through. I was working in a very high-powered, pressured job at the time, and also had a very stressful lifestyle. I had 3 children, 3 boys in 3 different schools. I had my own issues with my physical health. I'm an amputee. So I lost my leg when I was a baby. And for me, I was just me and I got on with it. And my parents brought me up to be extremely high achieving, which was great, but it didn't leave room for when I was struggling or when things were a little bit difficult. So the kind of story in my head, the program in my head was just keep being amazing, keep going, keep going. So all this stress was building up. I wasn't listening. I wasn't taking myself seriously. I can see that now. At the time, I just thought I was lazy and not good enough. And eventually I did receive a diagnosis of fibromyalgia, which was such a relief, but also such a shock. And so it's such a mix of emotions. But one of those was guilt and shame, which was a familiar emotion and an old story, but I didn't recognize that at the time. So we know, because of the teachings of mindfulness and the science behind mindfulness, that the brain doesn't know the difference between a thought and a fact. So if I felt guilty because I was lazy, I believed that I was lazy. I believed my own bullshit. So of course that would add to the layers of stress and the layers of shame and the layers of guilt. And we know, you and I as practitioners in this work, is that the body and the mind are inextricably linked. So what we don't express, it gets stored in the body. So what we don't, what's that saying? There's a Brené Brown who talks about this. I love Brené Brown. And she said, when we don't feel our emotions, they metastasize. And I think that's such a powerful analogy for any kind of disease or condition, as well as anxiety, depression. You know, any of our pain is because we're not attending to who we really are and how we really feel. So just to give you a backstory or a background of what fibromyalgia is, it's a cluster of symptoms. So it's very elusive and it's very difficult to diagnose, but it's very real. And it is listed as a somatic disorder, which of course makes people think that they're making it up, because it's all in the mind. But if you think about what I've just said about the power of the mind and the body connection, how clever the mind is to show up in the body and say, Nina, something's not right. But what we tend to do is second guess ourselves and think, no, I'll just keep going. I'll just work another hour. I'll just make more food for the kids. I'll just keep going and I'll put myself last. And eventually my symptoms became so bad that I could barely get out of bed. And I was really very poorly. And it's only looking back now that I can see how poorly I was, because at the time I thought I was making it up.
That's interesting what you're saying, Jackie. There are a few things. The very, very first thing is that it took you 2 years before having a diagnosis.
And no, let me chat. Sorry, I probably didn't. 2 years before I tried to find out what was going on, and then probably another 3 years before I finally got a diagnosis.
Okay, so we are talking 5 years of
Probably.
suffering.
Yeah.
Yes, before you could give a name to that.
Yes.
I remember you were saying once to me that fibromyalgia, you don't really diagnose this. You diagnose this knowing that, okay, this is not this is not that,
Absolutely.
this is not
It's
that.
a process
by
of
default.
elimination. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. So we can imagine, and I'm talking to other women who may be suffering from fibromyalgia, or maybe they know someone who suffers from fibromyalgia. You're saying that it's getting more and more known because it is finally recognized as being a proper illness, instead of, if I have understood, having that feedback from the medical staff because they didn't know, or she's just kind of making it up, or not being taken seriously. So I just can imagine. And you're talking about fibromyalgia. I've had sarcoidosis, which is another rare condition.
Yes.
And I think the level of pain has just nothing, it's just not comparable. But when you have a rare illness like this, which is not recognized, you feel extremely lonely and
Very.
isolated. And
Yes.
you, as you are saying, you question yourself, is this me? Do I really suffer like this?
Yes. Especially if that is your programming from way back. It's so deep rooted that we don't even know that it's there. This is when we're unconscious, when we're not awake. So although I teach mindfulness-based stress reduction, I like to call it consciousness, or just being awake and coming home to who you are and listening to the deep soul of who you are. But what we tend to happen as we get older, especially women, but not just women, but especially women and mothers, we put ourselves lower and lower and lower down the pecking order, and we don't listen to our inner voice. We push it away. Or if we do listen, we think that we're wrong, we're bad in some way. So there were many signs for me that I wasn't well, but because of my programming, my conditioning, it was just keep going, be amazing, which is great. I salute that, and I'm grateful for that program. But I needed another program, which was also, what do you need to do to take care of yourself? And honoring that voice. And we know that when we take care of ourselves, when we put our own oxygen mask on first, we then give more authentically when we do give to others. And I know so many women that have got conditions like fibromyalgia or ME or sarcoid or lupus, the hidden disabilities, the hidden diseases, but the diseases are very much about attacking your own body. So although fibromyalgia is not strictly speaking an autoimmune disease, it mimics an autoimmune disease. So when we think about that, when we're attacking ourselves, when our body is attacking itself, what is that about? And when we think about how we talk to ourselves and our relationship that we have with ourselves, very often we're attacking ourselves. We're talking to ourselves as if we are bullshit, as if we're not good enough.
It's interesting. I'm trying to not interrupt you because maybe you will see in the interview the sound and the video is a little bit, there is a little gap. Anyway, I was wondering if you could share with us what was the starting point for you to decide, okay, maybe there is another way than taking drugs.
Yes. And God, tell me about the drugs. I tried every drug. I was on amitriptyline, nortriptyline, gabapentin, pregabalin, ketamine infusions, which is the street drug, but also the horse tranquilizer, under general anesthetic twice a year. So that's just a small snippet of the drugs that I tried before I then decided to try alternative methods, because I tried everything. And I'm a nurse, I'm a trained nurse. And so I believed in the medical profession. I believed they had the answers for me. But I was so lucky to have, my pain specialist was a anaesthetist, and he also sent me to see a pain psychologist. And she was incredible, just changed my life in so many ways, but not immediately. It was little steps, baby steps. But she said to me, I don't think you're depressed, because she did the depression questionnaire. And I was depressed. I was low, but I was ashamed of that as well. But she said, have you heard of mindfulness? And I'd never heard of it. And she said, it's really very powerful. And because I'm a therapist myself, I was open to the mind-body connection. I was open to thinking there was a psychological component to this very real condition. And so I did a mindfulness open day. It was an introductory day at Guildford University. And it just was like, wow, bing, just these little bing, bing. And then maybe a few months later, I was able to find a MBSR course, mindfulness-based stress reduction course, the 8-week course that John Kabat-Zinn formulated. And that was 9 years ago. So I did the 8-week course and meditated every day for 45 minutes, changed me completely, helped me with my pain and my symptoms, but I was still on all these drugs. And then I finished the course and I stopped meditating. Because a bit like when you go to, I don't know, you lose a stone and then you go back and you eat chocolate again, don't you? So it was really typical, but it was part of my journey, because then it confirmed that actually I know it works. So, and I'd heard this voice in my head for a long time saying, you need to train in this. Yes, you're a therapist, but this stuff is incredible. It's more powerful than psychotherapy. It's more powerful than counseling, because you don't have to necessarily go digging around in the past, because you get those light bulb moments and connections anyway, the more you connect to yourself. So I did eventually listen to that inner voice. And I did a 3-day training in Brighton, but then I still didn't trust myself. I still had those doubts of I'm not good enough. So then I trained with Bangor University, and they are the centre of excellence according to the powers that be in terms of mindfulness teacher training. And it was a very, very powerful training that I did, because you have to do the course again as you're doing the training. So you have to go back into you again. And that's where it takes so much courage. But it changed my life. And I've now been teaching for nearly 6 years. And I teach mindfulness-based stress reduction based on the John Kabat-Zinn model. But I also do it uniquely in my own way, because that's what this stuff has taught me to do, to be me. And to share my gifts with the people that are ready to hear.
So just a little thing, psychotherapy is not only about the past, it's also about the future.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. And I'm not dismissing psychotherapy. I think it's wonderful. But what I'm saying is, because of my background in counseling and then the mindfulness, the two work together so beautifully.
And how would you say, because mindfulness is about how we connect, how we sit with whatever we are experiencing. So how would you say mindfulness has supported your journey with fibromyalgia? What did that change on a daily basis for people to understand what they could gain from this approach with this kind of illness?
Beautiful question. Thank you. It's changed my relationship with my pain and with my body and with who I am, with that internal dialogue that is always there. So the ruminating thoughts, the judging, the limiting beliefs, it helped me to sit with that, listen to that, make friends with it. And it continues, it is a journey. A journey, like you say, is also going into the future. So I'm not saying I'm fixed, but I absolutely know passionately, because of that relationship that I now have with myself, that love affair that I'm having with myself, which sometimes means that I don't like myself very much. That's part of love. I am no longer on any medication at all. And I have been medication free now for nearly 4 years. 4 years. 4 years in April. And it didn't happen overnight. Well, in some ways it did happen overnight, but in other ways it was a gradual process. But once I just knew I didn't need them anymore, I just stopped within 2 weeks, and I was free of the venlafaxine, which everybody says it's impossible to get off. But actually I was off the venlafaxine, the very, very strong antidepressant, which works on the nervous system. So it is historically very, very difficult to get off. And I've seen people trying to get off it and they have all sorts of horrible symptoms, but for whatever reason, I didn't have those symptoms. And I'm no longer on any of the other drugs either. So for me, I know that it works because I'm living proof. That doesn't mean that I don't sometimes have pain, sometimes have fatigue, sometimes have muscle ache, but it never gets to that Nina, Nina, blue light, emergency, emergency, because I listen to the rumblings.
Yes.
And that's what mindfulness meditation teaches us to do. It helps us to learn to listen to the messages before they become catastrophe.
Yes. And may I ask you a question, because this is something that is so often happening. You were on antidepressants, and I hear that in people who are unfortunately suffering from COVID at the moment, they are being offered antidepressants. And the question I would have to you, and I think that would be interesting for everybody listening to us now, is that what is the hen and what is the egg? Which came first? What I mean is, are you depressed because you are depressed, or because of whatever you are living through your life? Or are you depressed because you are suffering and there is a chronic pain? Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. And again, a beautiful question. And I can only answer for myself because we are all unique. Yes, and I wouldn't want to give a kind of generic answer, because that would be insulting to anyone that is experiencing, and I'm trying not to use the word suffering, experiencing episodes of depression or low mood or anxiety. So for me, I recognize now that I had depression on and off for many, many years, but it had been pushed down. So I had episodes, and I'd been diagnosed, and I'd been given antidepressants, but I was ashamed. And so I didn't talk about it openly. I didn't share it openly. So it was one of my programs, but it was one that I pushed away, and I didn't want to acknowledge, because I was embarrassed, even though I was a counselor myself. And there would be times when I might share it, but not in a kind of really owning it kind of way. And so when I then became diagnosed with fibromyalgia, because of all that old programming, I think the depression, of course, was going to be there. So depression is about ruminating, going back to the past. Anxiety is about being in the future and worrying about what might never happen. And the two often go very, very closely together. You can, people try and define and say that it's this or it's that. It's whatever it is for you. And that's why I'm a little bit nervous about labels. But for me, of course, I was depressed, that on top of having one leg and really struggling with a lot of stress in my life. And there were lots of things going on in my family system and things that I didn't feel I was managing. And then I get fibromyalgia. And then I feel guilty and ashamed for having fibromyalgia. So remember, when we don't feel our feelings, they metastasize. So of course, my depression is going to get louder. It's going to be there. But when I owned that, and I was proud of that journey, and I was proud of that being part of who I was, and it was a spiritual awakening, if you like, or coming home to me, I was grateful for it. But that took a long, long time to be grateful for something that is deemed to be a weakness or a malfunction. And I can't remember what the statistics are. You might be able to help me, but certainly now with COVID, the incidence of diagnosis of depression is skyrocketed.
I don't have the figures, but yes, it's among, not only, we're not talking only about adults, we're talking about children as well.
Absolutely. And it's the soul is sad. Yeah. So why would we be ashamed of that? Why would we push that away? And again, as a counselor and as a nurse, there's often diagnoses of depression as, it's reactive, or it's circumstantial, or it's indigenous. It doesn't matter. If you feel sad and you're feeling out of sorts, then it's whatever it is for you. But very often, if we feel, it's normal because, then it's okay. It's okay. You don't have to feel any shame about it. But why would we feel shame about feeling sad? We don't feel shame about feeling happy. We don't wake up happy and then go, I mustn't be happy today. That's terrible.
Yes, there are some emotions that are more socially accepted, and some others which are socially to be hidden and denied.
Yes.
And I read in a book recently, and I would like to have your opinion on that as well, is that, and that's what I'm doing in my practice. And people are smiling at the beginning, but I think it's really opening a door to freedom to be. Treat your emotions as if they were people. So if you deny the sadness, if you deny the shame and the guilt, what do you think, how do you think they will react?
Absolutely. It's
They,
like a
they,
fair
they will
weather
want to
friend.
fight. Exactly.
Are you familiar with the poet Rumi, the Sufi poet, and the poem The Guest House?
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and that's
Yes.
exactly what he's talking about. Whatever's here, greet them as friends, meet them at the door, the dark thought, the shame, the malice, invite them in,
Yes.
because they might be sweeping you out for some new delight. And I love that concept. And
Yes.
Eckhart Tolle quotes the Shakespeare quote from Hamlet: "There is neither good nor bad, only thinking makes it so." And of course, we attach a judgment to a thought. It's good or it's bad. And if it's good, we want to hold on to it and kind of cling to it. And if it's bad, we want to get rid of it. So if we're told that it's bad to be depressed or low mood or feeling sad or anxious, then we will hide it. So
Yes. And I liked when you were talking about guilt and shame, because guilt and shame seem to be part of women's life. And when we have guilt and shame, aren't they? It's I always say it's like you're just adding another layer to yourself. So you just can't stand with pride and dignity. It's just pulling you down more and more. And that is what you were saying.
Absolutely. And I'm a big fan of Brené Brown, who has done a lot of research on guilt and shame and the courage to be vulnerable. And if you tie that in with when we are body conscious, when we are aware of how we're feeling in our body, so you just demonstrated beautifully how guilt and shame feels, because it was like this. But when we begin to have a relationship with who we are and our mind and our body, we feel that more quickly. And we go, shame, I recognize you. Or guilt, I remember you. And then we have that pause where we can do something about it, rather than getting caught up in the story and believing it's true. So Brené Brown said so beautifully, the antidote to guilt and shame is empathy. The antidote to guilt and shame is empathy. So rather than going, oh no, and I'm going to hide it and I'm going to put some more bricks on the top to make myself feel even worse, we can go, oh, hello, guilt, hello, shame. What do I need to do to take care of myself right now? And that is such a deep-rooted component of mindfulness, of consciousness. It's rooted in Buddhism. It's part of the Maitri loving kindness meditation. When we notice that we're feeling shitty, sorry, but I'm not going to say sorry. When we notice that we're feeling shitty, whether it's guilt, shame, depression, anxiety, anger, all those emotions that we're not supposed to feel, when we notice that and we love ourselves even more, guess what? It doesn't stick. It doesn't stay.
Yes, and sorry, I have an appli coming up, and I would say it's. And tell me what you think of that. We learn that from Buddhism and meditation, and we've taken that in the Western world. But if you take some distance with that, I believe that it's the core of humanhood. I believe that it is in each of us. The thing is, we've had. We've had education, we've had the bad sides of religion who just told us you have to be like this, you have to be like that, and you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that, and you should feel guilty for this, and you are dirty, and all the things that have been integrated for centuries. And we ended at the end of our timeline being there with that guilt and shame and blah blah blah. But it is our innate core to be happy and joyful and playful. We just are in our boxes of beliefs. And
yes, thank you. And I love that you use the word playful, because again, Jon Kabat-Zinn says, mindfulness and this stuff, it's work, but it's also playfulness.
Yes.
And it's heartfulness. So when we learn to come home to who we are, and it sounds so kind of fluffy and woo-woo, but trust me, if I hadn't had my journey of depression, anxiety, physical pain, disability, I wouldn't be able to sit here and say, I know this stuff works. Because it would just be woo-woo, psychobabble, and it wouldn't mean anything. But because I've gone through that myself, I'm so passionate about it and continue to have to come home to me. And that's why I teach what I teach, because if I didn't, I would be lazy and I wouldn't meditate. I wouldn't do it, because I'm like everybody else. I would procrastinate and find something else to do.
I really like when you say, is it woo woo? Is it not woo woo? I like that because, like you, I would say, try it. I would say to people,
Yes.
give it a go, and
Yeah.
then we talk again about it if you think it is woo woo. Because, like you, what I would say is, you know what? I am functioning so much better, and it is bloody, excuse my French, efficient.
Yes.
Someone who is more efficient in what it is that I want to achieve by doing that meditation. So it's not woo, it's a way for the brain and the mind and the body to work. So woo or not, well, give it a go and see by yourself.
Yeah, and it's a bit like a placebo. And there's a guy who I follow called Dr. Joe Dispenza. I don't know if you know him, but he
No.
wrote a book called The Placebo Effect. And he said, what's wrong with the placebo if it works? You know, when we say, oh, it's only a placebo. Well, if it works and it's free, why would we do that rather than go to drugs and surgery and interventions that don't necessarily work? They just put a sticking plaster on the top. Now, I'm not saying don't. I love the balance between Western medicine and
Yes.
and academia, especially. I love the science behind mindfulness, but I also love that it's rooted in ancient wisdom, and the people before us knew this stuff anyway. We've just been clever enough to prove it and evidence it.
Mm-hmm.
But as you say, bring that beginner's mind and just try it and see. And for me, I tried everything else. And in the end, it was like, okay, I'm on my knees here. I will give this a go. And bit by bit, slowly, I changed my diet. You know, the way I eat now, I would never have imagined that I was eating the food that I eat now and the things that I put in my body and the fasting that I do. I'd have thought I'd lost my mind, but I haven't. I found it. And this works for me.
It works for you. Yes. And I find again very interesting when you say, I was on my knees. I didn't have any options. I've tried everything. And if we could open that door of options to people, because as a hypnotherapist, people come to me very often when they are on their knees, or at least when they've tried different things.
Yes.
And again, like you, I'm not denying medicine at all. I mean, we have both. We should be using both. That's where I stand. But if we could at least give the message, this exists and it is efficient. You can make a difference in your life before being on your knees.
Yes.
That would be a very powerful message, wouldn't it?
And I think for me, with COVID-19 and the pandemic and the world having this opportunity to wake up, I'm seeing more and more people coming before they're on their knees, especially the younger generation. They may have got the messages and the kind of, this isn't working for me, but they have a more open mind. You know, generationally, people talk about depression now. They talk about suicide. There was a program on television last night. I didn't watch it. I will watch it, about Caroline Flack. And it's tragic that she actually took her own life. But what's beautiful is that people are talking about it more now. So I have hope that that will change. And I have hope that people will come to us more and more before they're on their knees, because this is an opportunity. This COVID-19 lockdown, whatever you want to call it, is an opportunity. How do I want to live my life differently and more authentically?
Yes.
And John Kabat-Zinn, sorry, I will stop in a minute. You have to shut me up. But John Kabat-Zinn brought the 7 attitudes of mindfulness that we cultivate to bring mindfulness to our lives. And I love that concept. So as opposed to the religions, the doctrines, there's no 10 commandments, there's no rules, there's no you've got to do this and you're good, or you don't do that, you're bad. There's none of that. There's just bring these attitudes to cultivate and see what happens. A bit like when we garden and we plant some seeds and we see what comes up. We don't go back and dig the seeds up every 5 minutes. And I love that idea. And one of the 7 attitudes is a beginner's mind. So just see what happens. Just bring that curiosity and see what happens and just try it. And Ruby Wax, another one of my she's a mindfulness teacher now, and she's very funny and very real. She talks about her own journey with mental health. And she says, it's not for everyone. Mindfulness is not for everyone. So I'm not saying this is going to fix you and it's the cure-all for everything. But I know that if you try it, it's going to change your life. Even if you just apply certain principles into the way that you eat your breakfast, or you drive your car, or you greet your kids in the morning, you're going to be more present. You're going to get more out of that.
Do you have in mind the 7 principles of Kabat-Zinn?
Yes. Do you want me to read them?
Please do.
Okay, they're in my course on the first page, because I think it's such an important message to say this is just about bringing curiosity, seeing what comes up. So the first one is non-judging. So simply noticing our likes and dislikes without being hard on ourselves and judging them as good or bad, because of course we judge. We're human. And it's part of the reptilian brain to look for danger. And is this safe? Is that not safe? So it's not about not judging. It's about noticing our judging and then not getting caught up in the story. Number 2 is patience. Ooh. Mindfulness is like gardening. All we do is provide the best conditions and then allow things to unfold in their own time. Number 3 is the beginner's mind, developing our capacity to see things as if for the very first time, with wonder and curiosity and freshness. Like children, like babies, like, wow, what's that? Number 4 is trust. So tuning into our intuition, listening and having the confidence in our own being, letting go of the idea that wisdom comes from out there. So I think that's such an important point. When we're teachers, it's very easy to get caught up in our own ego and think that we're doing all this magical stuff. It's the person in front of us that's doing the work. And if something resonates for them that we happen to say, that we share, that's because the wisdom is already in them, and that's their truth, that's their wisdom, that's their knowing. But when we are stuck in our head and we're in automatic pilot, so we're busy up in our head, we don't know the difference between our intuition and our inner knowing and the bully in our head. Yeah, we've all got that, oh, you shouldn't have done this, and oh, you think you're so clever, whatever. When we learn to be and to sit and to just be still with whatever's there, our intuition comes up slowly, bit by bit, and we just know what is right for us and what is not right for us when we listen. Number 5 is non-striving. So we all have goals that we'd like to achieve during the course. He says, write them down and then let them go. And it's true of the meditation. So many people say to me, oh, I tried to meditate, I couldn't do it. You know, my mind wandered off. I kept thinking about da, 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 da. That's meditation. That's okay. Whatever is here, let it be here. And as Pema Chodron says, we learn to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. But when we're striving to get to a particular place, we're blocking ourselves, whether that's with our meditation practice or the way that we're living our life. So non-striving, I think, is so important. As best you can, just follow the course without expectation and not trying to get anywhere. Allow the results to arrive all by themselves. So again, it's that beginner's mind. I wonder what will happen. I'll do this course, or I'll do a retreat day and see what happens. Number 6 is acceptance. So seeing things as they are rather than resisting or denying them, which makes us feel stuck. So with our attention on the present, we notice that everything is changing and unfolding. And then number 7 is letting go. It's often our ideas about happiness that can be our biggest obstacle to happiness. So it's about developing the courage to let go of some of those limiting beliefs that we cling to, such as I ought to, I should. So, you know, how often do we think I'll be happy when I'm a size 8 or 10, or I'll be happy when I've got X amount of money in my bank. I'll be happy when I get that car. I'll be happy when I've got my dream home. I'll be happy when I've found the person of my dreams, as opposed to being happy in the now. And then all that stuff comes anyway. So I love this idea of when we learn to let go, it's a bit like fruit growing and ripe in a tree, and when it's ready, it just drops. But he also says, John Kabat-Zinn says, we know how to let go because we fall asleep at night. And no one says, right, sleep now, boom. But we just do it. Now, we may have insomnia, we may wake up again, we may find it difficult to get to sleep, but we still do fall asleep. So that is a lovely analogy of just do it, just let go.
Absolutely.
Sounds easy.
It sounds easy, but it's not easy.
But I love how all those attitudes as well weave in one into the other. They're all kind of saying the same thing.
Yes. That's what when I'm teaching the mindfulness thing as well, that's what I'm saying to people. I always say it's the most simple thing I have ever learned.
Yes.
And at the same time, it's the most complex.
Absolutely.
And I think it's both.
Yeah. And I know all the Buddhist teachers, they say, you know, having a meditation practice and learning to just sit and be is so brave. It's so brave, because we don't necessarily want to be with whatever's coming up, whether it's thoughts, whether it's physical pain, whether it's distractions. And we will do anything rather than feel some of the feelings that are too uncomfortable for us.
Yes.
And as Pema Chodron says, mindfulness helps us to become comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yes. Sitting with the discomfort.
Yeah, but it's brave. So in some ways it's so simple, in other ways it's very complex.
Absolutely.
But if we overthink it, we're not going to do it.
And that is when it's so useful in our daily life in the 21st century, because we have we are being stimulated all the time, and it's very easy to become stimulated, over busy, and overwhelmed.
Yes.
So
yes.
That's when it helps.
Yes.
What would you say to someone, because this is what I'm hearing on a regular basis, two different things I'm hearing, and I was wondering if you do the same, and what do you do with that? First thing, oh, mindfulness, no, it's not for me. I've tried, it doesn't work. And the second thing is, oh gosh, no, there is so much fear for me. I won't go there, because what will I discover? So I was wondering what you would say.
So the first question, what about the people that are skeptical and they're saying it's not for them? Fine, let them get on with it. We cannot teach somebody that doesn't want to learn. So there's a beautiful saying, a Buddhist saying, when the pupil is ready, the teacher appears. But I also think that it's the same, when the teacher is ready, the pupil appears. So we are all teachers of each other. But the best thing we can do for the skeptics, and especially the people in our lives that when you get something that's wonderful and you want to share it, but they don't get it, of course we want to share it. But actually the best thing we can do is just be it. And people start to notice the change. And if they're curious, they'll go, wow, what's happened to you? I can see. And this happens with my students all the time. People will come and go, something's different. Your energy's different. You look different. And if they're ready to listen, then you can share that. But there's absolutely no point in trying to convince somebody that doesn't want to be convinced. So don't waste your energy, would be my example. And that's taken me a very long time to get to that place of acceptance, that not everybody's going to get it. And there are going to be quite a lot of people that are going to be triggered by this change in you. And that's okay. Let them be triggered. Let them go.
Yes. What I have noticed is that when you tell people who tell, because sometimes it may be because they don't trust it is working, or it's woo-woo, or things like that. And sometimes they think, I will not be able to. That's what I hear very often. I won't be able to, because my mind is going so fast, because I'm not used to that. It's just not for me. I've tried and it doesn't work. That's what I'm hearing a lot of time. And usually I say, well, mindfulness is not one exercise. It's about practicing and practicing and practicing. And it doesn't work, and it doesn't work, and it works a bit, and it doesn't work, and again it doesn't. So it is practicing.
It's a
journey. And it's also, I believe, about it's a life choice. It's a choice you make. It's a kind of a deal with yourself, saying, well, I have tasted something which is really good, so I want to keep going there. But there is no ending to that.
Absolutely. There is no place to arrive. And I'm remembering a podcast I listened to this week with Dr. Judd. I can't remember his surname. It was on a podcast called 10% Happier, if anybody wants to try and find it. And Dr. Judd is a psychotherapist and a psychiatrist, but he's also a mindfulness teacher. And he said, of the patients that come to him, so this bleeds into the second part of your question, the patients that come to him, or the people that come to him that are just, it's too much, they're either too anxious, too agitated, too in their stress reaction state. He starts very small with just one thing to do mindfully each day. So you don't necessarily have to develop a formal practice of a 20-minute meditation or a walking meditation or a body scan. It's maybe have your first cup of coffee in the morning and really be there for it. And that is part of the MBSR course. We do home practice on the MBSR course, as you know. And the first week is setting a suggestion that you try something that is a routine activity that you do every single day, day in, day out, cleaning your teeth, turning on your engine on the car, having your first cup of coffee, greeting your kids in the morning, whatever it is for you, but really applying mindfulness principles, so those 7 attitudes, to that experience. And that can change your brain chemistry. So it's not necessarily about doing the 8-week course immediately or having a formal practice. And then bit by bit, if that works for you and that you're curious, then you can weave in the other bits. But mindfulness is not just about the formal practice, it's about the informal practice too, which is our day-to-day lives. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. It absolutely does. And I think that's very interesting and very important to reiterate and to repeat the fact that it's not about being a perfect whatever that is, or knowing how to practice mindfulness, because as you were saying, one of the principles is that we are a beginner every time we go back to practice.
Yes. And Sharon Salzberg, who is a loving kindness, very famous, very well-known Buddhist teacher, mindfulness teacher, she says, isn't it amazing, with each one breath in, each new breath in, we get to start over. And I love that, because how often do we even judge the way we're breathing, or the way we're sitting, or the way we're trying not to think about what we're going to have for dinner that night? So yes. I love that.
And another thing I would like you to talk about is that when people say, I don't have time.
Yeah, I hear that all the time. And sometimes people have to be on their knees to come to you to realize that, of course, they've got time, because they will try anything because they're so desperate. And I like the Chinese interpretation of the word crisis means opportunity. So if it does take someone to be on their knees and to be so desperate and they've tried everything else, they will soon find that they've got time. We've always got time. We've got time to scroll on our phones. We've got time to go to the toilet. You can meditate on the toilet. But it's when we put it off and we procrastinate, it's because we are afraid. So going back to the fear question that you asked me, I just wanted to say a bit more about that, because a lot of my old conditioning and my old limiting beliefs were based in fear. And what we learn to do when we learn to sit with our fear and our anxiety and make friends with it slowly, bit by bit, at your pace, because guess what? We're in charge of our meditation, no one else. When we learn to be with our fear and our anxiety and realize it's not going to hurt us, it's just thoughts that then is showing up in the body, then we get to smash through those things that actually we're fearful of, that we might want to do something about. And that's why I now fly to Morocco on my own frequently. I bought a riad. I teach mindfulness in Morocco. I'm a woman out there on my own when I go. All those things before, I'd have said, I can't do that. That's too scary. And I'm reminded of the book that I read many years ago by Susan Jeffers, which is Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And when we're in fear, all we're scared of is the fear. Fear isn't a thing. It's an imagined thing. Like the monster under the bed that isn't actually there. But we can get so attached to that feeling. And actually, I've seen many people get addicted to that feeling of fear and anxiety. And unconsciously or otherwise, they choose it because it's so familiar.
Yes. And I would also add, as you say, you can do mindfulness on the toilets. It's really, you don't need. It would be very important to say that you don't need to. It's not a mass. It's not a frame like this. You can be mindfulness for 5 seconds, and you can do it anywhere, and nobody has to know you're doing it. It's a very, very flexible thing, isn't it?
Yes, very. And it's portable and it's free. So I remember when I was doing my 8-week course, and my teacher insisted that I did a meditation, a body scan every day for 45 minutes. And at the time I had 3 boy men living at home. We had 2 dogs, we had cats, we had people coming to the house. There was constant traffic. And I would sit often in the conservatory and do my meditation while all that was going on around me, because otherwise I wouldn't have done it. Because I was so desperate, and I'd invested. I'd paid money that I didn't feel I could afford. Of course I could afford it, but that was one of my anxieties, that, it's cost all this money. But I think that's another point. It's important to invest in yourself financially, but also energetically. So There'll be all sorts of reasons why we don't want to do this, and why we think we haven't got time. It's just another sabotage. It's another self-limiting belief, and it depends on how ready you are to go, actually, I want to do something about this. And 5-10 minutes a day, we know scientifically that can change your brain chemistry. It's neuroplasticity. And John Kabat-Zinn says you don't have to like it, you just have to do it. And so many people would judge their experience. They'll do their first meditation, they'll go, nah, didn't like it, wasn't for me. No, you have to go back and you have to do it again, and then you have to do it again. And you don't go to the gym and expect to get a 6-pack within one session. This is why it's an 8-week course, and this is why it's a lifetime's work.
Yes, exactly. I think it's important to say that it is a life choice. It's not those 8 weeks, or I'm going
Absolutely.
to do mindfulness. So you have your app and you do it, and after you think, oh gosh, what's happening? Well, it is a life thing, so you have to keep doing it.
Yeah, I liken it to when we learn to drive. And we have the instructor sitting next to us, and we pass our test, hopefully eventually, and then we learn to drive.
Exactly. And it's true for any qualification, isn't it?
Yeah.
And may I ask you now, a little bit aside from the pure mindfulness sharing that we are doing, would you say that in your journey in getting a different connection with fibromyalgia and the relationship with the medical staff and people around you and you with yourself, would you say that being a woman has been helping you or not helping you, or has been neutral in that journey?
I think it's been both.
Okay.
So I think that I've been my own worst enemy because I'm a woman, because I'm a mother, because I'm who I am, brought up as a woman in the culture that I was brought up in. It's my family framework, the messages that was given. And then I trained as a nurse, for example, in the 1980s. So there was a lot of misogyny around then. And there was a lot of belief systems that then sort of cemented where it already come from. Women should be seen and not heard. Don't speak up, don't question authority. And I was always a rebel from when I was born. I was born a rebel. One of the words my mother used to describe me was belligerent. And I remember asking her, what does that mean? And she was an English teacher, and I just loved talking about words. And she said, warlike. And I remember thinking, yeah, I am warlike. I've got this war inside me and I need to speak. But there was this battle between keeping small, doing whatever the conditioning that was about being a woman in my world meant, and finding this voice. So I don't know if that answers the question of actually both, because eventually when I developed my relationship with me and who I really am, and I loved myself, warts and all, I love my warts, then my woman's voice was even more powerful. And I think currently that's such a beautiful question because of what's going on in our world at the moment, particularly with feminism and women's rights. And I've never said I'm a feminist, but I believe in the feminine. I believe in the divine feminine, and I believe in our power and our raw and our wisdom just as much as I believe in men and their journey, their story. It's not a battle. I was about to say the F word then. That's how passionately I feel about this.
You can.
So it's both. It's about what we listen to. Do we listen to the negative self-limiting beliefs about what it means to be a woman, or do we listen to the ones that are like, I'm a woman, see me, hear me, roar. This is my power, but this is also my softness. This is my wisdom, but this is my vulnerability. And that's, to me, what it is to be a woman.
Yes, I find it very interesting that you, if I understand properly what you're saying, and let me know, it's that once I have made peace and accepted who I am and loved who I am, then I can find peace and love outside of myself, in other people, in other environments. I can find that way. And
maybe it's not about being a woman or a man, it's about what we believe we should be as a woman or a man.
Thank you. Yes, I think that is very, very powerful. And as you were saying, in that 21st century, we have the world of women, which is more talked about, open, the society becomes aware of suffering, of the voice of women. And in that context, with that balance between men, women, and who we are, and the representation of societies towards men and towards women, what would you share with us, if you have, what is the definition you would give to sisterhood?
Oh, gorgeous question. Gave me goosebumps. I think it's when we recognize each other. I think, you know, I have sisters all over the world, and there've been places when I've been in another country and I've recognized that woman as my sister for, I don't even know why, but I just felt it. And I think since I've developed this really beautiful relationship with myself, I'm much more ready to connect with other women at a very deep level when it's right, and learn when it's not. You know, I've made some mistakes. I have a very big heart, very open heart, and I wear my heart on my sleeve, and I can sometimes go into not enemy territory, but you know what I mean. It's about learning who your soul sister is, learning who is on your page, but it's also about learning about the other. And I listened to this really interesting TED talk by Elizabeth Lesser, and she's done a TED talk called Take the Other to Lunch. And she talks about how, you know, in this sort of new age of talking about finding your tribe and who's on your page and who's speaking your language, that's great. But actually, we also need to talk to the other, the person that might trigger us, the person that may have a different opinion to you.
Thank you. Yes.
So they are my sisters too. Because, you know, Pema Chodron says, you know, the people that trigger us the most are our biggest teachers. And it's knowing where that lesson is. And that's, again, a forever journey.
I do agree with you. And in that sisterhood, which is, as you say, we recognize those who are kind of alike, so it's easier. And then we can recognize those who are different. And you wonder how, this is my quest actually, how do we sit sisterhood with humanhood?
Yes. Yeah. And humanity.
Exactly.
So we can call it brotherhood too, you know.
Exactly.
Gender can be useful and not useful as a definition, if you like. And I've made some really deep connections with people of both sexes, and they are my brother, sister, my sister, brother, my whatever. It's about connection.
It is absolutely about connection. And then we can, that would be another interview, but then we can also question or open our thinking on femininity and masculinity in each of us.
Yes.
And that is really to do that, I think.
And that makes me think of the yin and the yang.
Exactly.
Of our relationships, but also Christian Neff, who is one of my favorite mindfulness teachers. She teaches loving kindness and self-compassion, and she talks about the yin and the yang of self-compassion. And sometimes we have to be, our self-compassion is like, where is our boundary, where is our no? And we have to go, no, that's not okay for me. Yes. And that is a form of love. But as women, I think for me, I was brought up to turn the other cheek, not get angry, not show aggression. So I was really confused about my boundaries and what was okay and what wasn't okay for me. And when I first started learning about my own boundaries and my own yes and my own no, I had a lot of guilt. So I'd maybe put a boundary in place and then I kind of retract it. Or if someone stepped over it, I go, oh, well, it's not, I can't do it. It's not my fault. And boundary setting is very much about listening to your yes and your no all the time. You have to keep going back to it. Actually, I said I didn't want you to do that, and then you did it. Can we have a talk about that, please?
Absolutely. Respecting ourselves.
Yes, but again, it's hard sometimes.
It is. Absolutely, it is. Could you, just to wrap up and end this beautiful interview, could you tell us exactly where you could welcome people in your MBSR, so mindfulness-based stress reduction programs here in the UK?
Great questions.
In Morocco as well.
Because I meant to say that and then I forgot. So you brought that back beautifully. And what I love about the unique way that I teach is that I teach in a variety of ways. So that's not just one way. I teach the 8-week course. And thanks to COVID, I now can do that via Zoom or FaceTime, and I would never have done that or would have been reluctant to have done that before. And I've had some incredible results in the last year. And I teach it in Morocco. I teach the 8-week course in Morocco. I've recently had my first Moroccan lady that actually did the 8-week course with me, and it changed her life completely. So that was very, very satisfying and exciting. And I teach 1-to-1 sessions as a one-off if you're just curious. And I call it mindful coaching, but really it's just a chat, and we see what your curiosity is and what mindfulness means to you. And we have a very intimate conversation about that. Sometimes that's enough. They have just one session and they might go off and develop their own practice, or then they might sign up for the 8-week course. And I also do a really lovely day at my home in Hampshire in England, which is it's like a spa day, really. It's a mindfulness spa day. And I did that because I felt there wasn't anything out there for people that were curious, that just wanted to explore mindfulness, maybe have a retreat day. Some people come as couples, some people come with their mum or their sister or on their own. And it's very much based on comfort as well as learning. Also, some people come back because it's such a lovely, fluffy day. I'm very lucky to live in a beautiful house overlooking the chalk pits, and there's lots of different places that we can go and sit and just be. And I also am passionate about food. And so I cook a Moroccan Eastern style feast, and we eat very mindfully and enjoy that food. And then after lunch, you have at least an hour just to be. So it might be coming and talking to me, or sitting with somebody else and talking, or you might go and just have a sleep in the garden with the cat. So those are the ways that I teach mindfulness meditation. Oh, and my retreats in Morocco, I can't forget that. So again, based on my own journey of mindfulness and trusting my intuition and knowing what is right for me, I've been brave enough to now go out to Morocco, and I've done 6 retreats. And I've also bought my own property out there. And I'm passionate about teaching mindfulness in Morocco, especially Essaouira, which you know Essaouira. It's a very spiritual place, but it's also very hip, very boho. It's just a great place to go for a few days away, get some sun. It's not very far away, so it's a 3-hour flight. It's cheap, and we just have fun. We play with mindfulness. So you might learn to meditate or deepen your practice, but at the same time, we'll go out into the Medina and we'll walk in the vegetable market, and we'll use our senses rather than just being a tourist. So it's quite a deep, enriching experience, but it's fun, it's light, and it's affordable. So thank you for that. And my website is skygardenretreat.com.
Okay, that's perfect. So you have understood that you have many, many different ways to work with Jackie. You can have just a taster, I would say, and then you can decide if you want to continue. You can have a 1-day in the UK with the beautiful Moroccan foods that you are offering. You can do that online, on Zoom. That's something that has developed because we had to, which was a great opportunity. And then you have the retreat in Morocco, in Essaouira, where you can enjoy being a mindful tourist, I would say, because you go in the Medina and you can smell and hear and listen and touch things. So having a deeper and more profound experience of what it is that is around you.
Yeah, and having done 6 or 7 now, I've lost count. Very often people that have wanted to go to Morocco for a long time, but they've not gone because of fear. They haven't gone because of self-limiting beliefs. And so many people have said to me, I've always wanted to go, but. So when I take them, I take them and I kind of hold their hand, but I also then throw them out into, okay, go and get lost in the souk. Go and buy the spices on your own. I can support you. I can be there in the background, but it's about enabling them to do things that are out of their comfort zone when they're ready. So the little things like getting lost in the souk can be really profound. And every single student has said to me when they've come back, it changed their life in some way. And because I live out there and I have a lot of connections now, and I believe myself to be Moroccan, I have a lot of contacts with the real Morocco. So, for example, there's something called a hammam, which is the local baths, and it's become a tourist thing where you can go to a fancy hotel and have a very exotic hammam with all the most beautiful things, or you can go to the public baths and be there with the real women and really experience a hammam. And I can introduce you to both of those, both sides of that, which I'm very proud of.
people, I'm sure you can't wait anymore.
Yes,
I will
exactly.
put down in the comments for you to have all the details if you want to contact Jackie.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jackie, for sharing that with you. And I hope this interview has been very helpful. Sorry, I know it has been, talking about fibromyalgia and mindfulness. Thank you very much, Jackie.
Yeah, you're welcome. And it's been helpful and hopeful, because it is about hope. And, you know, if someone had told me 7 or 8 years ago that I would be where I am now, I wouldn't have believed them, because I just thought I was stuck in that people tell you that fibromyalgia is an incurable disease and that you're never going to get rid of it. And I forget that I have a diagnosis. And I say that I have a diagnosis, not I have fibromyalgia, because I don't identify with that anymore. But I'm grateful when I get a few little symptoms or a little nudge or a, you know, a bad day, because it reminds me to take care of myself.
And this is about fibromyalgia, this is about chronic pain, this is about depression, anxiety, so many things.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Jackie.
You're welcome. And thank you for reminding me why I love to do what I do.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Jackie.
Bye.